Good morning to our listening audience. My name is George Smith. I have the pleasure of serving as the director of Michigan State University AgBioResearch. I'm really pleased to have one of our key industry partners here with me today, Ben Smith, who is the executive director of the Michigan State Horticultural Society. Ben, welcome. Look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, George. Great to be here with you. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Yeah. So before we get into the kind of the heart of our conversation, talking about the importance of agricultural research, what we do for your industry, and what the future might look like, tell us a little bit more about the Michigan State Horticultural Society.
Yeah, the Michigan State Hort Society was started a long time ago, over 150 years ago, on the campus of MSU, and it was really focused on that role that extension plays now with getting information out to the growers, funding good research, and also distributing it. And it's grown over the last 150 years, so now we're very much focused on research and education. We fund research through the university every year, and we put on the Great Lakes Expo, which is the largest fruit and vegetable conference on this side of the country every year in December. And so we're really focused on that. The Hort Society only deals with fruit, and so fruit commodities are our membership. It's the name we like. It's a legacy name, like I mentioned,
Mhm.
150 years. But I get several calls every year of people asking me, "Hey, how do I plant this in my garden?" But that's not what we do. We're
Sure,
just on the fruit
sure.
commodity side. So enjoy working in that space and across the whole state.
Yeah, well, we've had the opportunity on these podcasts to talk with some of your colleagues representing other components of agriculture in Michigan and really talk about the diversity of agriculture in Michigan, which makes Michigan special.
It
And
does.
certainly specialty crops and fruit, are at the center of that. And also industries that face some challenges in the future, which I'm sure we'll get into as we get further into this conversation. So to maybe kick things off, can you talk a little bit about how MSU research currently supports your industry's goals and priorities?
Yeah, I think maybe discuss that question a little bit even before we get in. I think it's really
Sure.
important to make the comment that MSU really does listen very well to industry. They're not just out there doing whatever research they think is important or research that they know they're going to be able to write a good grant for. They start by coming to us, commodity groups, Hort Society specifically, and asking, what do you need? What sort of projects are you looking for? So I'd say that, supporting your industry priorities, that's the key foundation of they're looking for what we need to start. Um, they do a really great job listening as well. It's not just they're asking, they're actually listening and then implementing it. So that's great. Specifically, getting specific, talk about a few of our fruit commodities, apples in the last few years. We've seen a lot of really great research on bitter pit. That is probably the most difficult condition to control in our most valuable apple, Honeycrisp, and it affects growers' bottom line, their financial return when they're not able to control it. And we've seen a lot of good research in the past 3, 4 years, especially of understanding what really is causing bitter pit and helping growers to control it better so that they can better grow an apple that is marketable at the end. Thinning has been an issue for a long time. Historically, it was hand thinning. The apple tree wants to produce a whole bunch of apples, and that's just how it's created, how it's made to do. Um, and it's going to produce an apple that's too small and not marketable, so growers have to thin. Hand thinning is very expensive. We've developed chemical thinners, and MSU has done great work in the last many years, decades probably, 10, 15 at least, figuring out how to recommend to growers to apply the thinning chemical, when to do it, at what stage. There's a little bit of prediction that the grower has to do, and it's it's difficult. So MSU has done a great job addressing that. Blueberries, we've been looking at varieties, which varieties to plant. The Michigan blueberry industry is very old and it's expensive to replant. And so a lot of growers haven't. They have varieties in the ground that are um, old and getting not obsolete, but there are better options out there. And so we've been funding quite a bit of research in the last few years of evaluating the new varieties. There's lots of good ones, especially coming out of MSU and other areas, looking at which ones are the best for consumer preference or for growability, and just being able to recommend to growers when you do pull out this old block of blueberries, here's some good options to replant. That's been great. And then I'll wrap up with kind of a little bit of a different idea. MSU just hired a new researcher in stone fruit physiology, and he has started just a couple months ago, and he's really done a good job at the very beginning asking questions of the industry. He's going out, he's talking to those peach and cherry growers and saying, what are our current issues? What do you need? And he's done a really great job. He's going to have a great career, I'm sure. He's starting well. So that's encouraging to see.
Yeah, Ben, that's awesome. Lot of great information to unpack there. You know, I'm a big fan of Michigan apples. I have to be unbiased, but I love Honeycrisp. I think a lot of people love Honeycrisp. And you were talking about, you know, a real prevalent disease issue. And that's one of the challenges our specialty crop growers face. And
Um,
the disease pressures change in the face of the variability in weather and more extreme weather that, growers in Michigan and beyond are facing. You also talked about issues with thinning and, you know, chemical means to do that have been developed, partly because of, I think it's fair to say, the costs of labor and the challenges of getting labor to work on specialty crop farms. And
for
we all
sure.
know that's a huge issue and still remains a big issue. And you can't beat Michigan blueberries either. I'm a big fan of those. And we did a podcast recently with Nancy Nyquist talking about that. But what I really want to comment on is the fundamental point you made about the communication between MSU researchers and the industry, and this attitude that we are in this together and we work together to identify what the top priorities are. And we, as the research enterprise of college agriculture natural resources, and the broader university and agriculture and food systems, we being AgBioResearch, are committed to making sure the work that our scientists do is relevant and makes an impact.
Yeah.
And the tremendous support we get from the state of Michigan for our base budgets and special programs is a direct result of that relationship. And we'll get into some more specifics of the programs that help enable that, not only that type of communication, but facilitate these grower focused research projects that are really honing in on your top priorities. So let's go a little bit more general, and we talked about the importance of the partnerships and working together to identify the priorities. What specific outcomes or benefits do you expect from MSU research?
Yeah, I think when the industry is funding research or using results from MSU, it really needs to start with the applicability and the, if this is a word, implementability. We got to be able to implement it on a farm. Um, a lot of research is great and necessary, but it's not something that the grower can take. I think what's great with the research the Hort Society sees through MSU is they can bring it to a field day or a conference, share what they found, and a grower can then choose, if they find it relevant for their farm, to go home and take action on it. That's, I'd say, a critical expectation, a critical outcome of MSU research, and something they do really well. Another thing is farming is very local. Grower has a plot of ground and uh, it's a busy job, and we don't have a lot of time to travel around to different states or even different countries and find what works over here and what can I bring back to Michigan. MSU does a really great job of spreading out and finding out, okay, in the West Coast and the fruit growing regions out there in Washington, Oregon, California, they've found this better way to grow an apple or this interesting thing to try in blueberry. Bring it back to Michigan. Hey, let's try it here. Let's see if it works in our different climate. Same thing around the world. And we visit, the MSU researchers visit around the world, and they're able to share the insights and education from other growing areas here in Michigan and ultimately make the Michigan fruit industry stronger. Um, Another thing is just the ability of MSU to evaluate new technology and looking much further ahead than a grower really is able to do. Grower uh, income is basically a break even. Farmers aren't in it to become very profitable and make a bunch of money and retire when they're 50. That's just not how it works. MSU is able to evaluate new technology, to look ahead to say, okay, this thing is coming. I need to get ahead of this and be able to recommend to growers, yeah, this is working, or no, that company is promising something they can't deliver. So, as you know, George, I'm very excited about MSU purchasing the autonomous sprayer just a
Mhm.
couple months ago. Hasn't been really trialed yet, but really excited about that
Yeah.
future. I think it's the first autonomous sprayer to be owned by a university here in the States anyway. So excited about that potential. Growers aren't going to go and buy an autonomous sprayer next year. Um, it's that forward looking of probably in 10 years, this
Right.
technology is going to be much more accessible to
Mhm.
growers, and it's probably going to be implemented in a wide range of
Uh,
different fruit crops. And MSU having that forward vision to say, let's answer the questions now before growers are saying, I really need to use this new technology is fantastic.
Great, great examples, Ben. Yeah, I just sit here and smile, kind of listening to what you said and kind of processing what you said. I want to follow up on a few points. And one is you mentioned something that's absolutely fundamental to the mission of ag bioresearch is ensuring the research that our scientists do is applicable. Now more than ever, it's important that we ensure that the work that's done, the research that's done, really makes a difference.
Yeah.
The days of science for the sake of science are over. I say
Yes.
that repeatedly. We have a
There's
responsibility to not only our growers who we serve, but also to the taxpayers that help fund that research to make sure there's a significant return on investment. And so focusing on applicability is really important. And the needs of industries change over time. Sometimes problems are solved, sometimes new challenges or new
hmm
opportunities like the
hmm
autonomous sprayer arise. And so it's
hmm
our role to be out front, to take advantage of those opportunities, to do that applicable research in partnership with you, and doing everything we can to help your growers, your producers, not just stay in business, but hopefully be profitable for generations to come. Because the challenges aren't getting any easier, but
No,
we're
they're
all
not.
in this together and we remain committed to that. And the other thing I think I want to follow up on is mention the fact that your comments are really a great testimony to the importance of the land grant mission. And I need to mention the important role that our partner organization, MSU Extension, plays in all of this,
hmm
taking that information that's available from other states, taking the information that's learned from trials, experiments here in the state of Michigan, and getting it out to your growers so they know about it, are aware of it, and can make their own decisions.
Yeah,
That objective, unbiased information is so important to your industries, and we really, really pride ourselves on that. And that mission is as relevant today as it was over 100 years
100
ago when ag bioresearch and extension originated.
started.
So,
Yep, absolutely.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit now about some of the specific programs or special programs that we have in Michigan that are really unique, but kind of exemplify that partnership
Hmm.
and that close working relationship between our agriculture commodity groups and MSU that enables us to help address some of these specific priorities, programs like Project Green. So, why is Project Green so valuable to your industry?
Yeah, green's fantastic, as we've said several times now. It starts with the industry priorities. When the researchers are putting together the application, they have to address in their application which industry priorities that they're going to be working on. It's a paragraph that they have to say this is how it applies. And if they don't, they get downgraded in the evaluation process. So it's a phenomenal way to stay connected to the industry. It's also a fairly quick cycle, so industry is able to get answers very rapidly, and Green is able to be very nimble as well. If there's an emergency that comes up or a project that maybe needed different attention, they're able to use those funds much more effectively than a big federal grant can do, which is often has a multi-year, 4 or 5 year cycle with a whole year to apply and go through several steps of applying, and then you finally get the money, and now we look at it for a long time. Green is much more nimble, able to get those answers out the industry needs in a critical time fashion. Um, it's uh, a great tool to help growers answer those questions quickly.
Yeah, and Ben, you know this. This is a program that the entirety of agriculture in Michigan can be very proud of. There is
Yes.
not a program like it in the rest of this country where our commodity groups come together, work together to sort of enable this program focused on the immediate priorities of the various industries that participate. And our commodity groups were instrumental well over 25 years ago in going to the legislature and advocating for this additional money that's part of the base budget for ag bio research and extension for this novel program. And there's lots of individual success stories, but
Hmm.
looking across the breadth of the program in the first 20 years of its existence, the economic impact to the state was over $2.5 billion. And it's just a little over a $5 million investment. So I'd love to get that type of return on my investments. I
Oh
think the
man.
numbers speak for themselves, let alone the numerous examples of real life impacts that have made a difference across the diversity of plant agriculture in the state. So
Yeah.
that remains one of our flagship programs, and we're committed to not only make sure it continues, but to maintaining those close lines of communication so we can have an even greater impact in the future. A newer program, the Agriculture Resiliency Program, I know you're aware, resulted from some conversations that Dr. Quentin Tyler, the director of MSU Extension, and myself had with what we call the Plant Coalition, the plant-based commodity groups, about what are your more long-term challenges you see on the horizon and how
Yeah.
can we help with those? And that led to a special request from the state of Michigan that's resulted in a recurring commitment of over $1 million that allowed us to hire new talent in some areas where we didn't have the expertise, a deep enough bench to be able to solve those problems. Challenges focused around soil health, challenges focused around water, efficient use of water, and extreme weather. So give me your perspective on the importance of that program and those specific issues to the industries you support.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it started with a conversation between MSU and industry, and we keep hounding that idea. It's
Mhm,
so critical to say these are not just things that are thought up by, researchers at MSU that are just, hey, how can we keep our jobs? They're
mhm.
actual needs that the industry has that we're coming and saying, how can you help us answer these questions? So as I mentioned, green's great for short term. This new program is great for long term thinking, long term issues. We're seeing the climate changing and farming changing because of it. And farmers need to know what's going to happen or be able to adjust to what is going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And our current funding just isn't able to really answer some of those really big, long questions. It takes a lot of money, a lot of commitment. Long-term
Mhm.
industry groups don't have that sort of deep well of funding to be able to say, we're going to do this project for the next 5 or 10 years and try to look at something long-term, or to say, I know we're not going to answer a question that benefits you now, this year, next year, or 3 years down the road. We're going to put a bunch of money into something that you're going to need 10 years down the road. That's, almost impossible for the
Right.
industry to really do. And that's why we went to the state and said, can you help us answer these? We see these problems coming. We
Hmm.
don't have the funding to be able to say we have these immediate needs. We
Hmm.
have to use our money to
Hmm.
answer. Can you help us answer the long-term questions? And they did. And you mentioned positions. It's critical to have people in the roles to
Hmm.
be able to answer the
Right.
questions. It starts with the ability to hire the right talent and keep positions so that we can answer all the questions, both the immediate and the long-term questions. So yeah, it's been great to partner with MSU again beyond Project Green to
Mhm.
say, how can we answer these big questions that are going to affect us in decades to come?
Yeah, great. So can you share an example, a specific example of when MSU research has provided a really tangible, significant impact to your industry? What's that one story you want to tell that you want to make sure our listening audience on these podcasts kind of know about of a research project that's really made a big difference?
Yeah, so you say one example, but we're not doing that. I have too many fruit
We'll take two
commodities
or
that,
three or whatever you want to
yeah,
do.
I won't take the next hour of this video, but we'll share a few examples
Okay,
of great
super.
things that MSU's been doing. This is years ago now, but I am also a grape grower in addition to my executive director role here with the Hort Society. So I remember a field day we were at. There was a weed scientist there presenting, and the grape industry had been struggling with weeds, kind of being unable to control them. We thought, hey, we're getting some resistance issues. So this weed scientist dug in and studied, and he found that the grape industry would have a lot better success if they just changed the timing of when they applied their herbicide. And it wasn't anything more complicated than that, which sometimes, great
Mhm.
research is just that simple. And his recommendation was, guys, you want to control these weeds better, just change up your time and still use the same stuff. It's not actually resistance is coming a little, but it's not as bad as you think. You just need to change the timing when the plant itself is more susceptible to the herbicide you're putting down. And that was really helpful information. You grape growers could choose then if they want to control weeds better and not have to use the more expensive herbicide, still use the older one that still was potentially effective if they just changed the timing. So that was a really helpful recommendation. In blueberries, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the industry has old plants in the ground. They're pulling them out. They're looking at new varieties to put in the ground, and they're finding they're having issues with those new plants growing and thriving. Call it replant disease, replant issues. So we have a new blueberry researcher, Josh Vanderweide, who started looking at that and investigated what's going on. Why are these blueberry plants not thriving when we pull out old plants, put new plants in the ground? And he was able to find several recommendations. There was no one smoking gun of if you just add this fertilizer, all your problems are gone. As I mentioned in the last one, sometimes the answers are easy.
Mhm.
For blueberry replant, sometimes the answers are hard. And so he had a list of this is what the grower needs to do, these three, four, five, six things to help ensure that when you do put your new blueberry plants in the ground, they will grow well. You will get a crop in the year you expect it because you never get to harvest in the first or second or third year. It takes time for that plant, whatever it is, to grow and then finally produce. And it's hard to plan a business when you can't know how many years ahead you have to wait. So that was a fantastic one. And then another example, spotted winged Drosophila, SWD, came into our state roughly 15 years ago. Huge disruptor to the soft fruits. So think tart cherry, blueberry, brambles, strawberries, those types of fruits. Strawberries probably not, they're a little too early. But the uh, researchers at MSU really jumped on that and were able to answer questions. Growers were just hit kind of out of the blue of all of a sudden you have this little tiny fruit fly that lays eggs and then larva gets in your fruit and now it's unmarketable and what do we do? And so they jumped on that 15 or so years ago, figured out, okay, what chemicals can we spray? How frequently do we need to spray to control what's available with limitations on spraying before harvest. You can't spray certain chemicals too close to harvest. You have to back off a little bit. They were able to make recommendations, so growers were able to still control this new pest, still be able to harvest their crops. And then over time, it's been years, but different recommendations of how to trim, how to do different things culturally to reduce the population of SWD. The Hort Society has funded a project on a parasitoid wasp
Mhm.
to attack the SWD eggs. In all the environment, growers are only able to spray in their orchards. We can't go drive through the
Mhm.
neighboring fence rows and forests and
Mhm.
spray to control SWD everywhere. We can only spray in our grape vineyards, our blueberry fields, our cherry orchards. Um, so this new parasitoid is able to go everywhere. And so being
Mhm.
able to rear that and launch that out, it's still young, so it's never going to control it entirely, of course, but it helps bring the population down, helps make
Right.
control easier. And then last example, it's not necessarily a research project, but EnviroWeather is huge.
Mhm.
Res Growers rely on the research data that feeds into how to use our weather data. We call them models, and growers are able to find a solution to a problem going on to EnviroWeather. You find your local weather station, it has all the weather data. You plug that into the model, and it'll spit out, okay, you had this event on this day, you need to control for this disease, or this insect is about to hatch, and you need to be ready to control it there. And it's a free service provided by MSU, extremely critical. Growers live and die by the weather, and we need to be able to know how to apply the chemicals, which are very expensive. We don't want to be wasteful with that, how to apply them most effectively. And it's an enormous service that MSU provides for the growers.
Awesome, Ben. Great examples of research in action and solving problems and making a difference for uh, the growers that you serve through your society and beyond. So, kind of looking to the future, we always talk about our situation in Michigan being special, which it is, through the partnerships we have with the Michigan State Horticultural Society and other organizations, the novel programs that we have that help us meet the needs of the industry and do the research to solve the problems like you described. But it's not something that we take for granted in any way, shape, or form. And the reason we have tremendous support is because of the message that our industry tells on why this investment is valuable. Whether we're talking a state investment, which supports the base budgets for ag bioresearch and extension and programs like Project Green and Ag Resiliency, or we're talking about a federal investment through the USDA National Institutes of Food and Agriculture. Uh, Absolutely fundamental to the work we do. But we're living in an environment right now where investments, state, federal investments are getting scrutiny. And people are asking, what is the return on investment? Why is this important? Why is this important to someone that's not a farmer? Very complex issues. So I want to get your perspective, but through a different lens. What would you say to legislators to advocate on behalf of continued funding, or alternatively, what would you tell them it would mean not to have this funding support for agriculture and for food research in Michigan going forward?
Sure. I think I'd start with just a simple, we need your help. This is not something that industry can hope to do on its own. We participate as best we can. All of the fruit commodities have programs
Mm.
to essentially tax the growers so that growers can fund these different needs through the industry. The Apple Committee, the Cherry Committee, Blueberry Commission, Tree Fruit Commission, Hort Society, we all fund research through MSU every year. Um, but it's not enough. There's not enough industry dollars. Industry is not just swimming in profit every year. As I mentioned earlier, farming is a low profit center job. Um, and George, I think you said it. I'd love to say it. I've learned over the years that I've been in this role. We are healthier when we all work together. The fruit industry does a great job working together, using our dollars as efficiently as we can, but there's not enough of them. We need assistance to be able to answer some of the bigger questions, to be able to keep people in the positions to answer those questions. And it starts with people. I would definitely emphasize to the legislators or who's ever interested in helping us, that we need help with positions and keeping people in those positions. Without people to do the research, what are we doing? We have to start there. We have to keep as many researchers in place and being wise about what we're looking at. The
Mm.
problems of 50 years ago mostly aren't the problems that we're looking at now. So we need to be wise about the positions we're filling and discussing between MSU and industry of what is the biggest impediment that you're facing on your farms, and how can we structure our staff, our researchers, to best help. Um, to the second part of your question, I think uh, saying, what would happen if we don't have it? That's thankfully a question we haven't had to. We've had good support from the state long term. They've been a great funder of MSU and extension over the years. Would love to see more. Could definitely use more. Struggling with a couple open extension fruit team positions right now. Um, so what does it look like with even less funding? It looks like fewer people available to help spread that message that this is the research, this is how to um, implement it on your farm. It looks like fewer people that growers are able to call and say, I had this problem, how do I remedy it? Uh, I had a board member a couple years ago who was starting to pick her apple crop late August, put it into her cooler, found out like a week later that she was getting a ton of internal browning in her apples, and
Mm.
nobody wants to bite into an apple and see brown. So they're basically unmarketable completely. Unfortunately, the person that she would normally call to ask that had retired, and she didn't have anybody. So she called me and said, "Who do I even call? I don't have a person." And I was able to give her a couple phone numbers to try to help. But that's the urgency of we need those people to answer the phone when you have that immediate question of help me save my crop. I don't know what I'm doing. Am I doing something wrong with my harvest schedule or how I'm cooling it down? What am I doing? We need those people there. So with lack of support, it looks like a less healthy fruit industry. Farmers are going to be less profitable, and it's not a, a a career where you can just choose to be less profitable. Less profitable farms means bankrupt farms, and a smaller fruit industry, a very different Michigan fruit industry that won't be healthy and viable for the long term. It'll be an industry that's unsure of which way is best. We're going to hear recommendations from chemical companies that you'd like to trust them, and I'm sure they are doing their best to give recommendations, but they're also selling you the chemicals. It's amazing to have MSU be able to go improve that chemical and say, no, they're right, or they're maybe exaggerating a little bit. You probably don't want to push it that hard. They're an unbiased
Mhm.
institution that's able to give good recommendations. Without that, growers are left and will be influenced one way or another by capitalism, by the market, and then it's harder to
Mhm.
judge what
Mhm.
is true without that independent third party. And definitely a big issue will be limited planning for the future. Growers are so much in a survival mode of we need to make decisions this year to get to next year and the next year to get to the year after. We don't have that broad 5, 10, 20-year ability to look into the future and say these are the issues that we're going to need to be looking at. It just won't happen. And then those issues will get here and we'll be unprepared and it'll be even harder to grow fruit. So those are those are the things I'd say. It's
Mhm.
even a much longer discussion. We could probably talk for a
Yeah.
whole hour about just
Yeah.
what the fruit industry would look like without state support, without federal support. It's critical for the health of our fruit industry to have that support. And I would say we're definitely, as I started, want to emphasize that again. We're not asking for others to do everything. The industry wants to
Mhm.
su support
Mhm.
the state support
Mhm.
as best we can. We are putting hundreds of thousands and maybe even millions of dollars. I'd have to total it all up each year into helping ourselves.
Mhm.
We're not
Mhm.
just looking for handouts. We want assistance. We're stronger together.
Yeah, Ben, great examples. And it's never fun to sort of think about the doom and gloom scenarios and what if, but given the conversations going on now, I think we have to think about those things and we have to double down on how to better tell our story. And you gave a lot of really great examples. I'm a huge believer in Michigan agriculture and the potential of Michigan
Hmm.
agriculture. Over $125 billion a year contributed to the state's economy from food and agriculture. I would argue that during the Great Recession, agriculture was the lifeline that helped keep the state of Michigan afloat. And I think there's
Absolutely.
good evidence to support that. And, looking at conversations nationally, which are important about how do we help society be healthier?
Hmm.
Um, Availability of nutritious food is part of that, and
Absolutely.
fruits and vegetables are part of that. And where I get nervous, and I think it's really, really scary, is thinking about some of the statistics available for your industry. I've heard numbers that over 50% of the fresh fruit consumed in this country right now is imported, and it's estimated that by 2030 it could be up to 80%. How does that help our population ensure that they can eat healthy?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can't feed ourselves by ourselves, our food supply is at risk. And we've got so
Absolutely.
many unique opportunities here in Michigan, the most diverse ag state with a reliable source of water. Other parts of the country that are also, major producers of the commodities you talked about, they got some real challenges with water. So we can do so much more in Michigan to
Hmm.
help the industry grow and help our population be food secure and eat healthy. But that can't be done without a robust investment in our programs, Ag Research and Extension, and the efforts that enable us to continue to meet the needs of your industry and help your industries actually grow
Yeah.
into the future. So much potential, and you nailed it describing, why it's important and what's at stake.
Yeah, there's so much room for growth. I live in Southwest Michigan, and I've seen, I'm sure, hundreds of acres come out of fruit production and go into row crops. And not that there's anything wrong with corn and soybeans, we need those
Right,
too. But
right.
the growth potential is there. Farms used to be able to be profitable on this
Hmm.
ground. It's great ground to grow fruit. And
Hmm.
you can't grow fruit all throughout the
Right,
state. It's mostly along the West Coast for
right.
climate reasons, and we have the potential to grow with, yeah, necessary investment.
Hmm.
Being able to have farmers be more profitable. The ones that went out couldn't be profitable, and so
Yeah.
figuring out those answers to those tough questions can make everybody more profitable and the fruit industry more successful. And then, as you mentioned, Michigan more successful.
Hmm.
The fruit industry supports a lot of jobs and healthy
Right.
eating for a lot of people.
Exactly. Exactly. So, but I remain optimistic about the future. We've got tremendous partnerships. The work we're doing is having an impact. We can have an even greater impact in the future, and we're going to do everything we can to tell that story effectively in partnership with the Michigan State Horticultural Society and our other agriculture industry partners, which really enable us to do the great work we do on your behalf. So with that, Ben, I really thank you for the opportunity to discuss the issues today, and we look forward to talking with you again in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.